he is 100% worth it.
He takes it to another level. Oh my God, I just fell in love with it.
Thanks so much, Jay.
Blew my mind. And it worked. I wanted to buy my thing.
Jay is, I would say, the Yoda of sales calls, man.
Just talking to Jay, he was so good at just taking what it is, seeing the opportunity and the value and the real reason we were making it.
Talk to Jay, because he got it. He can definitely help you out.
Talk to Jay. You're going to get a lot. You're going to gain a lot.
I would absolutely recommend him for any position that you have.
Jay's definitely the guy.
Give him the chance, give him the opportunity. You won't regret it.
He's good at what he does, so I highly recommend him, and I would book him before he is fully booked out.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Sales Ninja Show podcast, where we cut through the noise, ditch the outdated sales tactics, and show you how to close deals with confidence, strategy, and integrity. I'm Jay Lee, founder of Sales Ninja, and if you're tired of chasing leads, handling endless objections, and feeling like you have to convince people to buy, you're in the right place. Here, we do sales differently. We believe in positioning over pressure, where the right people lean in without the need for pushy tactics, and that's the heart of the reverse glass selling method, a kingdom-driven approach built on trust, service, and true connection. Because when you lead with value, sales becomes effortless. And when you sell more, you can give more. Today's guest is someone who has built strength in more ways than most. He's a veteran. He's a strong man. And he's someone who understands what it takes to win both mentally and physically. He's worked behind the scenes, scaling over a dozen companies, including taking an offer from under $500,000 a month to over $1.8 million in just 6 months. He brings a rare mix of sales mastery, inner game discipline, and spiritual perspective that shapes how he leads, sells, and builds. His work focuses on influence, objection handling, and helping entrepreneurs step into a higher level of ownership in both business and life. Today, we're stepping into the world of scaling, mindset, and what it really takes to grow when the pressure is on. Please welcome Paddy Haynes. Welcome, Paddy. How are you today?
I'm very well, man. What's up? Good to be with you.
Good to have you here today. There is a lot that we want to go through, and there's a lot that you've gone through that I want to find more about. So let's get started. So you lived multiple lives, from veteran to strongman to fractional CRO. So what shaped your drive early on in this process when you were younger, maybe as a kid?
That's a great question, man. So the reality is that it's changed, and it's changed as I've grown as a human being. The reality is a lot of my drive to actually join the military came from a desire to prove the people around me wrong.
Really?
As somebody who dropped out of high school with no skills, no qualification, no kind of potential signs of achieving anything, quite frankly, as I was told multiple times by the people around me.
Wow.
I was driven by a lot of anger and spite that, hey, I can build myself into something, I can achieve something great. And so when I walked into the careers office, and I had a recruiter who very much tried to dissuade me from the option. I didn't have any strength. I wasn't very fast. I had to build myself up from the ground and push my limits. And before you know it, I was in the military and did 4 years there before I ended up leaving to begin the next stage of my adventure. But that was really how it got started. And it changed quite a bit along the way.
Wow. Okay. So this is interesting because, you said you're a high school dropout, and, I grew up in an Asian family. That would be like getting disowned or beaten, or because if you don't have a master's, let alone university degree, let alone high school diploma, it's like, get kicked out on the curb. So how did that happen? Like, did you get involved with the wrong crowd? Did you not have a knack or like for school? What happened?
Yeah, I mean, a combination of the above. I never really took to the standard education system. I was painfully shy as a child. I was painfully thin. I was the subject of a lot of humiliation and bullying for a very young Paddy. And as a result, I very much just retreated inwards. I was a very introverted child who just liked to spend a lot of time in my imagination and reflection, and didn't really have a medium of how to express that. So as a result, that energy has to go somewhere. And it meant, falling in with the wrong people and making a series of, in hindsight, damaging choices that I didn't really have the mentals of good grounding around me to correct accordingly. And so the military was the first step of like, cool, this is what the extreme end of the spectrum discipline looks like. And that was the bedrock of how I built myself further from there. Keeping some tools and discarding some along the way as well.
So how is and you can go into how much detail you want or not, depending on how sensitive this is. How is the home? Like, did that affect your academic, your shyness, your confidence or lack thereof?
Yeah, 100%. So my parents, it helps to give a little bit of context. My parents were both Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
And they had me out of wedlock, and they eloped. As a result of that, they were ostracized away from their community. And they were young. They were both 17 years old. Very quickly realized into having a baby that just fundamentally as people, they could not connect. And as a result, they separated. So I was raised predominantly by my mum, who was a kid raising a kid, and a stepfather who very much believed in the belt and the fist.
Oh no! Wow,
that's the primary method of discipline. So that created a disconnect to the family unit, and being able to seek wisdom from like a strong masculine archetype. So I went to seek it out in the world, and obviously as a very impressionable young man, you kind of take the first thing that comes along that pays attention to you. And so it was a lot of guessing and fucking around and finding out, to say the least.
Well, I'm sorry to hear all of this, because that is tragic. That's traumatic. Just the way that you came into the world. And then, your parents being shunned and separated, raised by your mom and stepfather, having an iron fist. I grew up maybe not so harsh with that, but the belt and the rod, and that was something that was used, more times than I can remember, than I want to. That can leave a pretty permanent mark. How did that, that strong archetype, and when I say strong, I don't mean it in a healthy way. Because
I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, but that physical force versus that loving, emotional, mental, spiritual fortitude that we need as young boys growing up is something that's missed in many, many homes. So when you said your stepfather believed in the belt and the fist, is that what triggered you to, the actions that led you into the wrong crowd, in the wrong groups, in coming out of high school? Did that all take factors in?
It's a really good question, and I'll try and keep it as condensed as possible.
Yeah.
Initially, it just really, just to be quite frank, like I wanted to fight him. Like I wanted to beat him up.
Yeah.
I was like, cool, I want to get big, and I want to be able to give you some of your own medicine.
Yeah.
What it really taught me though, is a lesson that I think a lot of young people go through, and that is love isn't real. Love is temporary. Pain is the only master, and it is something that is temporary. And so what it really created, I'd say, through my teens, early and even mid-20s, is this inability to form like close, meaningful relationships with people, and really just have the worst fear that when those were made, that there was always going to be something around the corner. And it took a huge amount of self-reflection, mentors, learning, to really start to wrap my head around that this was a perception question that was rooted in how I was treated as a child based on unconscious habits that were ingrained in me. And so it's taken quite a bit of effort to really see the light, for want of a better phrase.
So when you said you wanted to be big and beat him up, how did you start that? Did that start in the gym? Did you start working out at home? What did you do?
You know what? That's funny. I didn't start. I didn't even get into the gym until my mid-20s. I've actually been painfully thin most of my life. So
Wow.
I was previously most of my life probably somewhere between 60 to 70 kilos. Now versus being 105 to 110.
Wow.
But I definitely was a scrapper.
Yeah.
I loved to fight. I loved conflict. And I generally understood that because this was the form of love that I received, the friendship groups you should be in should in turn have a lot of drama, have a lot of catastrophe, because it's that adversity and conflict, even into group, that creates camaraderie.
Yeah.
And so I literally didn't know how to be close to people unless we were at each other's throats, and kind of accepted that this, to use the overused term, toxic codependence is what connection actually looks like.
Did you get involved? Like, you were in the UK, right? Like, do they have those bare knuckle fights? Is that a common thing? And
I mean, so some exposure to that. Not that anything I personally took part in, but being in the military, definitely involved with some people who are well connected and part of that world, and got to see some experience of how that side of people lives, for sure. I don't know how prevalent it is on a large scale, but it's definitely like a niche subculture. I think that when you're in the world of, drugs and violence and drinking, then there's really no limit to how deep that rabbit hole goes to the things that you can be exposed to.
what kind of, and I know we're going a little bit faster on this deep dive, but what would you tell if you went back into a time machine when you were like a kid going through this trauma with the belt, the fist from your stepdad, trying to become bigger, better, and wanting to beat him and other people up? What kind of advice would you give yourself if you went back into time in a time machine?
It's a really difficult question to answer, because I don't know I would have listened to any piece of advice, but
Yeah.
I think it would have simply been as just the seed of hope of that this isn't your life. This isn't how you're going to turn out. Life will be very different. Life will be different. I think what I needed most back then was hope, more than anything. That's at least a gift that when I talk to other people in similar situations, either in their past or what they're currently going through, I have to give the thing that I didn't have, and that was hope, predominantly.
What would that look like if you're that, you're talking to yourself? Because hope can be a word, hope can be an action, hope can be, something that you give. What would that have looked like in that time? That, I know you said it would be hard for me to receive any advice from anyone, including yourself. What could that look like? Because you know yourself the best in terms of how you like to be spoken to, how you like to hear certain words, how you like certain things said, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It would have been something along the lines of, is that your own mental economy is a very different landscape when you stop investing so much time in believing you're unsafe. And that we only know people by our experience of them. Contrary to the popular idea, people are not their behavior.
Wow, that's deep. And then let's segue to the veteran. When you were in the military, how and what did that teach you with regards to discipline, training, and influence and mindset that affected your business?
There's a lot of stories that I could extract out of that, and there's one in particular that I want to go into.
Yeah.
And so when I was in training, you go through your basic, and then from there you do your trade relevant specialization. Being in the infantry, it was obviously warfare.
Yeah.
One of the scenarios that we were placed in was we had to go and dig a series of trench lines and have overwatch and observation over an area. From there, our task was to go out late at night, perform some reconnaissance, draw some maps of some good vantage points to be able to lay an ambush and find a relevant kill box to eliminate the enemy. In this process, we were sleep deprived for 48 hours. And if anybody has ever experienced that, you start to hallucinate. It's pretty bloody crazy.
Yeah.
But in doing that, where we laid out for the site, it went ahead. From there, the instructors thought it would be interesting to up the ante a little bit. So they let us know that, hey, there was a CBRN threat, which basically, possible chemical warfare. So we needed to get into our CBN combat gear, which is respirator, fall over thing, in addition to your pack. And then we would have to go on an evacuation line to get, casevac essentially. And so we had to run from this point in these conditions, 2 miles, full kit on. And as we're running, I got a buddy next to me and he's vomiting in his respirator, and you can just see it coming through his visor.
Wow.
And our corporal is screaming at him, don't take that off, don't take it off. Obviously, he's using a lot harsher words than that.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of bent over because I'm struggling. Like my back is in state. There's just nothing but lactic acid in my muscles. And, the corporal comes over and screams at me, says, "You look like a baby giraffe that's just being born. Get yourself together." And it feels like I'm breathing through a straw. And he says, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And I said, I'm trying my best, corporal." And he just gives me this stern stare. And he says, "What if your best isn't good enough?"
Ooh.
And that was the line that stayed with me for a big majority of my life. It was that line that would serve as kind of the fuel to really put myself through some extreme conditions to get to where I wanted to be. The problem with that is that fuel burns like diesel.
Yeah.
It's very dirty.
Yeah.
It would cause me to work 16 hours a day.
Wow.
Until I had like borderline conjunctivitis. I'm literally passing out at my desk.
Yikes.
It would cause me to train in the gym till literally I'm in tears because my nervous system is completely cooked.
Oh my God.
It would cause me to be so intense in the way that I sold that I could win deals through like a very combative, almost boxing match approach where I would objection handle for 2 hours long.
Wow.
But at no point in that process did I have any kind of balance, any kind of peace. I would find myself struggling to cope with burnout at least every 6 months to a year. Whew. But until that inner monologue and narrative was corrected and swapped for something a little bit more sustainable.
Oh my gosh. So that's interesting because those, say sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never harm you. And that's still not true, right? Like those words are even more lethal than toxic warfare because it's burning you out. It's, messing your nervous system, getting cooked, working 16 hours a day or working out in the gym so much that, you have nothing left in the tank. So I guess in some ways it can feel like a start, like a catalyst in a good way for people who do not have that. Like I was just talking to a friend and their child is, involved in multiple sports, but in life, in school, and in every sport, he's just kind of like, what is the word? Comfortable. And I think the word that was used was complacent and even lazy. And then I think the justification was, he's more creative, right? Like, I don't know, like, I know we have different kinds of approaches and this is not a right or wrong thing, but how do you help, or can we help motivate people who are kind of like comfortable and complacent and can do better? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, definitely. Particularly when you have young people who are showing natural aptitude, but the drive just isn't quite there. There needs to be an awareness and an education through experience of how other people live.
Yeah.
For example, my stepdaughter, she's just finished and come back from a trip from being in Zanzibar to help build a wall for the school, to help teach the children over there.
Wow.
Obviously, very different culture, conservative Islamic nation, in poverty. And that was an eye-opening experience for her, which has put her in a position to reevaluate and have gratitude for what she has. I think that's one half of the equation.
Yeah.
The second is a relentless kind of varied engagement with activities that perhaps they haven't tried to identify where is the passion here, and then an encouragement to test what their limit actually is. I think there is a lot of wisdom over pushing yourself to the point of breaking, so you can realize how resilient each of us actually is. And most people haven't done that in their lives, even to people who are quite a bit older, provided that there is a belief foundation that ultimately my life is safe. There is love in my life. So there's kind of at least two sides to that coin.
Well said. I think that's a good tension between, you know, the environment that you said you talked about with your stepdaughter teaching at this, you know, school that's filled with poverty, and then coming back, because I've gone to many missions trips. You know, living in North America, we are very, you know, what's the word, spoiled. And then going to like third world countries where, you know, most of the kids that we were doing missions work with are orphaned, abandoned, have no shoes, and are happier than most people I know living in North America with so much more. And then coming back to Toronto, Canada, and having this culture shock of like, there's so much here and people are still so busy trying to get more, where people there are trying to collect bottles to make money just to live. And then the other point is, you know, as an Asian, you know, with parents that are very, you know, quite strict, you know, having to, you know, practice the piano for like 3 hours at a time, right? Because I'm a musician. They forced me in some ways, and I didn't like that, because my friends were playing ball hockey, they were playing soccer, they were like, they're skateboarding, and I'm like, I couldn't go, and I would get butt cramps because I was on the piano bench so long. But, you know, I look now, and, you know, I was hired as a music director for a church for 5 years. You know, I played for decades, and now I can use it as recreation, and I have gratitude towards my parents. I think it was hard at the time. Like, you know, when you get push, but then you learn skills, you gain aptitude, you gain competency. And these are skills that are irreplaceable and things that, you know, can be used for the rest of your life. So there is some merit in that. So I think there is, like you said, a balance of like, how do we know? It's also good to also be pushed to the point of breaking, to challenge ourselves, to break, you know, and elevate to higher heights that we've never gone before, right?
I mean, it makes total sense of why it's such a controversial topic in how we raise our children. I think we only need to look at the kind of the cyclical effect that this has, typically speaking, that if left unanalyzed and unreflected upon, we are treated in a certain way. We raise our kids to be another way. They probably find some sort of middle ground between the two, and then it can go either way. And so there's never really a building upon of like what those lessons have been, particularly in a disconnected society now that we have. But I think also there is a lot of merit that fundamentally the point of raising children is we need to prepare them for what material reality looks like and what it's like to engage in. And, you know, it can be brutal. And, you know, there does need to be a lot of grit that exists inside that. So yeah, definitely a very nuanced, fine line that gets people's backs up, to say the least.
And this is a perfect segue to, you know, talking about parenting. Like, I don't know how many kids you have, but when you have kids that are different personalities, different characters, and some, like I was kind of alluding to, are not driven, some are driven or self-driven. How and the way that you've been raised up, the way that I've been raised up, very different from the way that our kids are being raised up today. What are some, you know, parenting tips or best practices for someone that is such a high disciplined, committed, I don't know if you call it performer, or someone that gets results, when you have children who are very different or wired differently? What kind of tips would you give as a parent to help other parents help their kids succeed in life, if that makes sense?
I mean, that's such a good question. And I feel like that's such a delicate question as well. I think there's a couple of things that needs to be in check first before any kind of action is taken. And one is to accept that fundamentally your kids are not clones of who you are. You know, they are their own individuals, their culture, their perspective, the things that they're subjected to is inherently different. So by default, their worldview will be radically altered to our own. And there's going to be blind spots to that. The second thing is a degree of acceptance that we need to support them in whatever it is that they want to do with their life. And perhaps they will make life choices that we don't align with. The real piece here is that before we reach levels of psychological maturity, we all did make mistakes. And so it's really understanding their behavior. Where is that going to lead them? And are we projecting our fears because we think if we behaved like that? There needs to be a ruthless amount of curiosity, but also a degree of levity that children don't understand consequences to actions.
Mhm.
And so my general recommendation is get them out in nature and see the way of the world firsthand. You know, that's how our ancestors traditionally did it. They didn't necessarily have to be as stern about certain things, but they could just witness the natural world unfold around them. Kids today with iPads, TVs, power, water, all the rest of it, you know, their experience is very limited. And so, you know, it's very, very interesting. Just to not go off on a tangent, but in the United Kingdom, 80% of the population does not trust strangers by default.
Really?
In Copenhagen, in Denmark, only 30% of the population has a mistrust of strangers.
Wow.
And as a result of that, the way that they raise their children is very differently. With babies that are very young, when mum goes to a cafe or something to see friends, they'll leave the babies outside in a pushchair because they believe that the fresh air is good for them. And they don't have any fears that somebody's going to come along and kidnap them. You know, I wouldn't dream of doing that in the UK. I would be so filled with fear. But generally, the culture that you're around in your society has like a huge impact as well. So depending on what kind of life you want to offer your child, I think proximity and environment is quite understated in contributing to their development.
I love that proximity environment. So that's why even the three people that you hang out with, you know, if you're the smartest person in the room, then you need to find a different room. Environment is, you know, when people can experience nature or life or different cultures, there's a sense of experiencing gratitude that can teach us through pain and desires. You have been a strong man. Let's talk about that. Like, how did that happen? Where did that happen? Did it happen after military? Why did that happen?
Yeah, it happened after the military. So I've got a great buddy of mine, and he's always been quite massive. And we went to a gym, and he was like, "Yeah, let's do some deadlifts." And I had never done a deadlift in my life before, and so he starts to warm up with 70 kilograms. And he pulls it, and of course it's light. I couldn't even pull it off the ground.
Yeah.
And he wasn't, you know, belittling it all. He's like, "Oh, you know, like we're working your form, blah, blah, blah." But I remember walking away being so annoyed at myself. I was like, damn, you know, I've always felt myself as being strong, but I'd never really tested myself in this arena. So I started hanging out with him more. And I was like, cool, I want to, you know, have some competition. I want to learn from him. And then eventually he's like, cool, let's go down the local strongman gym. So like wicked, I walk in there and, you know, there's logs and there's stones and there's death metal playing. I'm like, you know, there's just chalk bowls and, you know, stuff everywhere. I'm like, cool. And I see this dude and he's 6'5", he's covered in tattoos. He's about 300 pounds.
Whoa.
And he's doing this giant stone lift.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know how heavy the stone was, but anyway, he does it. And afterwards he sits down and he starts crying. And I go up to him and I'm like, "Are you okay?"
Yeah.
And he was like, "You know, I've had such a bad week. Nothing's gone my way.
Wow.
The only thing I was looking forward to is that, can I make something good of this week and achieve something that I'm proud of?" And I just looked at this guy who, by all accounts, is incredibly intimidating, but just such vulnerability in that human. And I was like, and he's expressing it to a total stranger.
Yeah, right.
He's not afraid of how he's perceived. He doesn't have ego.
Yeah.
And that was the kind of the switch in my mind that I was like, oh, if I'm big and strong, I can be more vulnerable in my environment. Because if somebody, like, people are a little less quick to judge you or be negative if you look like you could throw them out a window, even if you never would.
Yeah. That's so true.
Yeah. So that was the start of it. Leaning into that and just really realizing that individual was a reflection of the entire strongman community. Incredibly supportive, incredibly nurturing, wants the best for each other. Out of all the strength sports, I personally feel that you see the most amount of sportsmanship occur in strongman.
Wow.
And as a result, it's very much got my heart placed all over it. And it's actually where I would go on to meet my current partner, who, you know, now I'm a stepfather. We have a house. We've got a baby on the way. So that,
he was in the strongman gym.
So she's a powerlifter in the strongman gym. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So the way that I tried to approach her is she was looking at a yoke, which is like a frame that you carry on your back.
Yeah.
And she was just looking at it. And so I ended up just going over there and barking at her. I was like, cool, go on, let's load it up then. Let's go for a run. And she's like, oh, okay.
Oh my gosh. Like you were her trainer.
Yeah. And that's what she thought. In answer, she's like, oh, I thought you were like a personal trainer trying to like poach me as a client.
Oh my god.
And then from there kept sliding into her Instagram DMs. And yeah,
that's
kind of
pretty smooth.
History. I mean, yeah, I tried my best, dude. I haven't got any dating tips. I wouldn't recommend it for everyone. But...
Well, you helped lighten the load and lift up her yoke.
Nice, dude. Nice.
That is incredible. Wow. Well, and congratulations on that. I didn't know you could find your partner in a power lifter. I mean, I can imagine the fights that you might get into and how that might look in terms of, are there any like sparring matches or any grappling or?
Oh yeah, we love a good wrestle. Back when she wasn't pregnant, for sure.
Yeah.
It'll be like, cool, can you push me over? And you know, because she's a power lifter, she's obviously very good at the things that we don't do in strongman. Like for example, I can't bench to save my life, dude. Overhead press all day.
Yeah.
And she'd be like, oh, you know, you're not doing this. You know, you're not engaging your lats. You know, your line's way off.
Wow.
And then, you know, that can be sometimes appreciated. Sometimes it'll be a source of frustration. And it'll go both ways. But it creates a healthy kind of tension to want each other to be better.
Now, how did all this physical training that you've gone through and all this rigor with discipline in the military help you in your mindset in sales and scaling businesses?
Definitely a couple of things. One, to think bigger. You know, when I went with my friend, it's like, cool, I can't pick up 70 kilos, right? Like 150 pounds. Now I can deadlift 730 pounds.
What?
I never envisioned that for myself.
Wow.
And so closing is like, cool, make 10K a month. But it's like, why not play it bigger? Why not figure out like, how can I make 40K, which is what I would go on to produce. And then from there, why can't I teach this to other people?
Wow.
But the biggest one is realizing that you're capable of doing hard things and you can do them consistently. And so obviously when you strap up to go and do a 730 pound deadlift, you can't be in a position of, oh, I don't know if the weight's going to come off the ground, or I don't know if I've got this. It's like, no, you have to be fired up, and get it or not, you just gotta go for it. And it's the same in business, is that when you're closing or you're rolling out initiatives, you know, you have to think quickly, you have to be certain, you have to make what sometimes feels like a dice roll, but you have to back yourself. Otherwise, no one is going to believe in you. And sometimes you're going to make the wrong call, but it's not about that. It's about how quickly can you pivot and get that thing on the right track. You know, people only see the wins, but there is a series of questionable decisions, but they're just quickly rectified. And it's the same in training. You miss a lift, it's like, cool, back to the drawing board. I'm not going to sit on that. I'm going to reevaluate. I'm going to look at my weaknesses, and I'm going to get on that ASAP.
I like that. I think a lot of people, you know, even the thought of trying it will stop before they even try. So there's a mindset there. And then people who try it and fail, many of them are like, oh, that's too hard. And then people who keep doing it and might get hurt and there's a setback, they're like, you know what, I don't want to injure myself because ABC. But you have this mindset where you kind of go through all these schools, you know, when we talk about the high school dropout, graduating from these tests that school gives you so that you can pass those tests and, you know, reach a new summit. So you're kind of always leveling up, which I think really goes part and part with your scaling strategies. So let's talk about that. The 500K, you know, under 500K, you know, that's pretty impressive. Most businesses will never even get to 500K a month. So what you said, you're like a mechanic. You kind of go in, you kind of break stuff, you kind of undo stuff. You see gaps, you see leaks. What did you see immediately that needed fixing in this 500K a month business to get it to 1.8 million? Culture. Okay, tell us more about that.
So to just expand on that a little bit, there are two main winning elements to scaling any business. One of them is that the team has to believe you, they has to trust you, the rep retention needs to be high. And the second is, in line with the marketing and the sales process, the relevant SOPs have to be in place. But none of that matters because you can't necessarily control all the data points, but you can control the environment in which they arise in. if people were not bought into that mission. And the way that I generally elicit compliance from reps to show like, hey, I want you on board with me, I am going to get you to your goal, is I ask every single rep on any of my teams to make 3 simple agreements with me. And that is, number 1, always do your job. I have a job to do. You have a job to do. I have responsibilities. I have commitments. I have to keep a roof over my family's head. You have whatever you need to. Always do your job. The second one is be clear. Don't hesitate. Tell me exactly what you want. I will lay out a plan for you to get there. You may not like every step in that plan that's involved, but I assure you with all my confidence that if you commit to that, you will get where you want to be. And I make you the promise that if I feel that is compromised and it's no longer on the cards, I will tell you transparently, and so you can make your own decisions. And then the third one is I will never threaten anybody's job security on the basis that you need to leave for your own health or the emergency of you, a family member, a friend, or a pet that is in need. You have the flexibility to go and handle your stuff. And that is generally a conversation that produces a bit of tension, but gives them a future to look towards, that here is somebody who is going to get me there, who cares about me, has high expectations of me, but ultimately isn't going to make me put work before my life. That's usually the first kind of cornerstone I want to establish with a team.
Okay. So I'm going to go over them, and because I think some of the best ways to learn and understand is if I can recap what you said. So, Paddy Haynes, who everyone's listening to the live and or the podcast replay, is he talked about two winning elements in culture, that belief and the sales and marketing SOPs need to be in place. But before that, there are 3 things that need to happen in a simple agreement to control the environment for people to be bought into the mission. Number 1, always do your job. Number 2, and I'm not sure if I got this perfectly, so be clear, do not hesitate, always ask what you want, and you said you will promise to give them clarity. I would love to get actually more expansion on that. And the third thing is, that you will never threaten their job security if there's anything that is affecting their health and their future.
Yeah. So yeah, number 2 does deserve a bit of extra context. So what I really mean by that is, when I look at any business and I initially go in there, one of the first questions that I'm faced with is like, cool, hey, business owner, what's going on here? And they'll say something like, hey, my reps suck. I'm like, okay. I'll go to the reps and I'll say, cool, what needs to happen in this business for you to make more? And they go, oh, well, the leads suck. Then I'll go to marketing and I'll say, cool, what happens? And they'll go, yeah, the sales process sucks.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
true.
I'm in like a bit of a pickle. Now, how do I figure this out? And the problem there is everybody gets locked into a very binary way of thinking, which is like, it's this thing or it's this thing. The leads are good or the leads are bad. My reps are good or the reps are bad. But it's not using just 3 simple questions of like, cool, what has to happen? What could happen? What should happen? So when a rep comes and say, hey, these leads suck, I'm getting a terrible shot, right? It's like, cool. Typically, when we feel that the leads are not aligned and turning up on our calendar, what we have to evaluate is, okay, how much friction has that person received? Has the content they've received aligned with where they're at in the funnel? And what is the standard of communication overall in that process in alignment with the time so that they are most receptive? When you look at your process, what were your findings based on that? And then I'll go, I haven't really thought about that. I'm like, cool, let's figure it out. And then I'll sit down and I'll map out an SOP. I'll compare it to what the gold standard is to what the top performer is, because most of the time, contrary to popular belief, reps are not lazy. Reps are often overwhelmed and they struggle with decision fatigue. It's like, cool, I've got to check Slack, I've got to check my CRM, I've got to do this follow-up, I've got to make these dials, I've got to prepare this proposal. And they don't know how to structure their day for success because they're not used to, as the overused saying goes, running their business like a business. And so essentially what I'm teaching them is a form of critical thinking, like modal or temporal logic, to really go, okay, what are the kind of moving parts that we can influence? And then what is the mindset of their belief to actually influence those things? And that's where we kind of ride this line that goes between, cool, what is your personal mindset and limiting beliefs that are potentially projecting onto your prospects? And then what are the things that you're not seeing because you simply don't have enough experience in business yet? When you correct both of those, you create a sense of loyalty, and that's how you truly scale someone's income, like further than just sales training alone.
That's so good. So what were some of the first moves that unlocked growth towards 1.8 million a month? And I know that before we got into the podcast, you said you want to help them get to 3 million a month.
Yep. One of the first things that I noticed is that in that particular audience, the trust was very mixed. As a result, conversion was low, cancellation rate was very high. The first fault in the chain is there was no edification of the closer as being the go-to person to fix whatever they're stuck in. It was like, hey, go and have a chat with such and such, rather than, hey, this is the person who really helps give you clarity on transitioning out of a career of trucking to have a clear plan that isn't going to overwhelm you of how you can go and learn a data engineering role. Simple little tweaks like that. And then on the closer side of the house, actually using materials that resonates with that particular avatar. Those avatars were not mapped out upon joining. So they were treating every lead exactly the same, rather than acknowledging there's at least 6 combinations here. Top of funnel, which is high skepticism, low trust. Middle, somewhere in there. Bottom of funnel, hey, I'm in pain and I need to go. People who have never done this before, people who are in an adjacent field, or people who are already experienced and just want to get better. The sales process had to change for each of those buckets. As a result, things ended up getting streamlined a lot. Templates changed, SOPs changed, language changed. Eventually, the VSL changed based on answers we could use to deduce. And that was the big one that gave us a lot of latitude, in addition with rep loyalty and reducing the time it took to onboard, because people were coming in and getting super overwhelmed. And those were the initial steps. To the degree that are now, that I need to restructure the team, essentially. Something similar to like a Google does with pods, where, you know, setters and closers are kind of in groups that are mutually serving each other. Because right now the gap is there's no accountability, too much communication happening in back channels. And as a result, there's balls that are being dropped left, right, and center that there's just no visibility on. I apologize for running away, by the way. I'm super passionate about this stuff.
No, not at all. This is what I want to hear. Okay, so I'm going to back up a little bit, because you said some incredible things. I think I heard you say when you're mapping out the avatar, I think I heard you say there's 6 types of people, from the top of funnel, mid to bottom, and people who have experienced, people who are adjacent, and that everyone needs, like the sales process needs to change for every bucket, I think is what I heard, versus one cookie cutter method. Did you say, and did I hear you say that the VSL changed based on these 6 types of people?
Over time it did, not as one of the initial changes, but, you know, for example, the pre-call and the VSL that a lead would receive based on their application answers would be exactly the same. What it did in time is, based on those answers, that they actually receive something different that is aligned. Because half the problem is our largest paying potential customers were seeing it if they were already technical and going, oh, this isn't for me. They're only helping new people. So we have to address the unwritten trust killers, essentially.
So depending on where they were at, because like you said, the one cookie cutter VSL may not be for everyone. It's like that spray and pray. But if it was like segmented for the exact person with an exact pain, then that, you know, very targeted and personalized VSL can speak to that person and that pain, which will affect obviously their show rates, their qualification, and their ability to want to, you know, buy your stuff.
Spot on.
I don't know if I've ever heard that before, because I usually hear and see like there's one, you know, VSL for all, kind of like have this big net, catch as many as you can, and then a lot of them, like you said, are unqualified, or, you know, not good prospects, or they're not the right fit, or they're completely out to lunch, and you know, even like maybe there's fun, like there's so many different people coming through, but you had this very targeted approach, which is like, I'm gonna date myself here, but choose your own adventure books, right? And I used to read these like fantasy, these storybooks where I'd be like, okay, if you jump out of this and go over the waterfall, this is what happens, and turn to page 23. And and then I would have like all my fingers in like 10 different places because I don't want to die, right? So the VSL is like telling you you're not going to be this person, but you want to be this hero, and so you can pick door number 4, right? And the VSL is going to be different for that person, right?
Spot on. I mean, that is. So there's two ways of going about it. Usually when I approach a business owner, they're very scared at the idea of having such a radical change like that. So it's usually not the first thing I suggest.
Yeah.
What I will do is map out what those avatars are and typical entry point of the leads of where they sit in the funnel, and then the sales process will change. As that shows itself as being true to the situation, that's usually the next step of implementation. Because it's inevitable, right? Like you increase ad spend, you get all the leads that are at the bottom of the funnel, cost per call rises, that net is going wider and wider and wider. So it's not that cold traffic is bad, it's just that the more successful you are, it can undo you if you're not being targeted for how warm are these people that are now coming in, and are you attracting a different section of the market that has different needs, different wants, different aspirations, and different pain points.
Let's nerd out a bit on math and the money math, if you can, and you can go into as much detail or as you want. When you're going from a company from 500K a month to 1.8 or even 3 million, in terms of KPIs, what kind of numbers are we looking at for the number of setters, closers, the amount of leads, ad spend that needs to be placed to fill, a setter and closer calendar, average close rates? I mean, you don't need to go like. Give me a high level, like what would it look like? Because I believe that numbers, when we understand the data, that can help us drive decisions that can help generate predictable income to scale.
Yep. Yeah, great question. And just for anybody listening, there is a big caveat that this is highly contingent on niche, probably being the biggest one.
Well said.
And then also the cost of your delivery being a big one as well, and your overall LTV. For example, in many models, sure, your CPA can be a little bit higher, provided that your LTV is super, super high.
Right.
As a rule of thumb, for a business that is at 1.5, 2 million bucks, they're going to be investing anywhere from 300 to 500,000 in ad spend on average.
A month.
A month. Like a kind of a cost per call stat is they want to be keeping that like sort of around the 400 mark, depending on margins for sustainability. The overall metrics for conversion stay fairly static in the sense of that gold standard wise, I want a minimum of 60% cash collected. I want a 70% show rate. I want a 30% close rate. And then provided that cost of fulfillment isn't skyrocketing, that usually gives us enough meat on the bone that we can be kind of getting somewhere between like a 3 to 5x ROAS. I mean, that may want to go a little bit lower depending on how aggressively a business owner wants to scale. But it's like, cool, I'm going, what is kind of the sweet spot here that we have some overflow of cash that we can make more calls with, but also, what's going to actually put money and allow the business to do that and also be able to absorb some hits, if marketing takes a hit, for example.
That was beautiful. I took all that in, and those metrics all make sense to me. So just to for people who are listening, Paddy was saying context depends on the industry, on how you're scaling. Ticket price, I'm actually interested in. I'll just ask you in just a minute what the average ticket price is. But in order to go from 500K a month to 1.8 million, and Paddy wants to take this company to 3 million, and I really believe that he's going to get past that. They're doing about 300 to 500K a month in ad spend. You're looking at a 3 to 5x ROAS, 60% cash collected, 70% show rate, which basically means how many of those book calls will show up. And the more people that can show up, the better you can, even at the same close rate, you can literally scale. I think there was one company that I helped go from 30% show rate to 94% within like a week or two of implementing this system. And at the same close rate, we scaled it really quick, 30% close rate. So what are some things that help closers, because we're talking about the Sales Ninja Show podcast, close at a higher rate? Or is 30% kind of like, man, we've kind of like hit a good spot and let's keep that?
So yeah, that's a great question. Like, I think it's been said by a lot of other smart people as well, but like fundamentally you don't scale business off of A players solely. You know, you need to be able to scale it off like B- players or kind of C+ players. And so that 30% is kind of the KPI. Is like, cool, can I take somebody who is kind of mid in their skill set and ability? If I can make all the systems and SOPs streamlined that they can perform at 30% KPI, that's the projection I'm going to use of like what we should do all our numbers off to how we can scale this business, how we should spend money. From my top performers, I want them converting at like closer to 50%. And that does require a little bit more advanced skill set and training. The challenge that most coaches run into is their coaching process is, and this isn't poo-pooing anybody's like methodology, right? But usually it's like a random act of coaching or kind of a cyclical of the methodology rather than being very targeted and actually giving a particular rep, a particular bit of advice at that particular time in their development. Because the majority of the time, the reason that a rep isn't selling is because of some sort of internal block.
Yeah.
You know, the human experience is very universal, right? And essentially people are no different from ourselves. Like if, for example, a rep has like an internal narrative that they judge people who are perhaps a bit disheveled, if they perceive that in a lead, they will project that judgment onto them. They will treat them coarsely. They will not attempt to make a connection. As a result, their ability to influence is jeopardized. So 9 times out of 10, if you can make your reps more empathetic and better human beings, they will convert more.
That was incredible. You know, yeah, I think you said it really well. Making more empathetic and better human beings, which you would hope that we'd all want to be. But I've been on sales teams where they're like, yeah, I'm going to close them so I can get my cash bonus, or I can get my, you know, prize, or I can get my commission and bonus. Like it's a means to an end, and people become a way to get there, which is like, let me step on your head, grab your credit card so that I can get what I want. Right.
People are real.
Yeah. Yeah. I know I just want to respect your time, but there's just so much I want to uncover. So we've got to do a part 2, but let's talk about the future. Let's talk about, you know, AI. Let's talk about software. When you're scaling these businesses, streamlining SOPs, do you have a software stack and or AI that you use or recommend, or are you kind of old school?
I wouldn't be able to look after 45 million in annual revenue without AI, quite frankly. I'd highly recommend, if nobody has it, that you're looking into Claude Sonnet 3.5, or you're utilizing Manus, or you're using something to pull reports, perform data scrapes, make large evaluations on things like open rates, click-through rates, amount of touch points it takes for a lead to close, and be able to draw kind of comparisons on large data sets. That is an invaluable skill. And if managers and business owners aren't using that by end of the year, they're going to get overtaken by people who do. Like it's the future, in my opinion.
So did you learn that, or do you hire people that know how to do this?
I learned it through a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and confusion, and being like an old person like that, trying to wrap my head around it.
Because I feel like this is new technology, that at least people knowing how to leverage the tools. There's one thing that it's been out, but being able to use it to do what you wanted to do. So you went to YouTube, you kind of broke stuff in like Lego, just figure out how to put it together.
Essentially, yeah, like as the saying goes, a lot of fucking around and finding out, a lot of just experimenting that's happening. But yeah, I think that while it is good to learn from people and seek external sources of information like coaches, courses, things of that nature, nothing really replaces direct experience of just figuring out how does something work. And the way it began is literally blocking out 2 to 3 hours on my calendar at end of day and just clicking on stuff and just going, okay, how does this even come together? And just maintaining a childlike curiosity and embracing the fact that, yeah, you're going to get frustrated, and this is going to keep your ego in check. And you're going to need to Google a lot of things. You're going to need to search up a lot of YouTube. But just trust yourself to figure it out. And you can pretty quickly get the basics of like SQL, Python, creating databases, creating tools that serve you, that make your life easier. It's funny that you say embracing this, because I feel behind the curve, quite frankly, compared to some people out there who are just like, wow, how do you even do that?
Yeah.
So it's a pretty endless rabbit hole, that one.
Well, people can find you on Facebook. Let's see here. And you have a free gift that maybe you want to segue and talk about, which is a proven influence and objection handling strategy. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So that document contains essentially the last 5 years of my sales experience with teaching how does influence form in the brain? How do you break things down? What is a limiting belief? How do you overcome it? And what are some of the tactical things that you can do to get some leverage in a conversation, and centering around composure, and then the use of semantics and critical thinking to your advantage as well. So a lot of this is rooted from going and studying a shitload of medical journals and neuroscience, learning from people about human behavior, speaking with some incredibly influential people. There is going to be some similarities to perhaps other content, but that material is not a copy. That is by and large original thought over years of experience that I put together. So I've tried to make it as Swiss knife and applicable as possible, giving a mix of theory and application. And I would put my money where my mouth is that if you use this stuff, you will close more deals. You will feel a little bit more peaceful and in control doing it. And just overall, you'll get a bit more success in your career as a closer.
You caught me at the 5 agreements. I'm already loving this. Let me just expand this. I'll zoom this. I think this already shows, integrity, being true to your word. It says these are 5 agreements you make with yourself every day consciously. They are, how do you pronounce this word?
Oh, the panacea, the cure-all.
The cure?
Yeah, the cure. The panacea is like a cure for everything.
I'm learning something here. To becoming emotionally volatile, self-validating behaviors, remaining too comfortable. This is what we talked about throughout this whole podcast, and developing genuine empathy, which is what we ended off talking about to the sales reps. If we can teach them how to be better human beings and be more empathetic, we can say these 5 agreements: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These may be daily. I am always working on becoming a more composed and measured person. I am impeccable with my word. I do not take anything personally, not even my own thoughts or feelings. The only thing I assume is a sale. I assume nothing else about me or anyone else. I will always try my best, even if there's a chance it might not be good enough. Ooh, this sounds familiar from that guy, the corporal, right?
Right? Yeah, there's a bit of influence from there. There's a bit of wisdom from some shamanic mentors that's sprinkled in there as well, to kind of combine a bit of effective influence mentality and just some overall good life wisdom.
That is very cool. So I think there's people saying nice video. Thanks for tuning in. So so I always ask my guests, what does sell more to give more mean to you? And that's kind of like my motto, because as a former pastor, former introvert, former banker, former high ticket closer, I always want to see how I can sell more so that I can give as much as away before, life is done.
So it's both internal and external. Like, everybody will have their own self-doubt, their own kind of inner demons, for want of a better phrase. Be honest with yourself about what those things are. Once you know it, that's probably the thing you lack in your communication. And so the cure to that is go and give that to somebody else. If you are lacking in confidence to do something with your life, find someone who is similar and charge them up, boost them up. That is the way that you truly internally start to mend what doesn't feel aligned, but it will allow you to work on giving what you do not have. And that to me is sell more, give more, be more. I think I paraphrased that incorrectly. I apologize.
You're a deep well, Paddy. I'm deeply impacted. I'm deeply resonating with your story and your adventure of life, sales, and scaling. So everyone, thank you guys for tuning into the Sales Ninja Show podcast. Now go apply what you learned to your next sales conversation and practice leading with clarity, calm, and service. If you're ready to master faith-driven sales psychology and close high-ticket deals with integrity, you can head over to gosalesninja.com and you'll get some free training. And we are here to help you sell with confidence and serve from a place of purpose. Remember, your work is stewardship. Keep your eyes on God. Stay faithful in the small steps, and we'll see you in the next episode. Again, Paddy, thank you so much for your time. We want you to sell more to give more. We are offline.